What is good, YouTube? What is good, man? Welcome to a new video. Alright. We're going to be reacting to artists who ruined their careers with one performance. Can you believe one performance can ruin a musical genius career, man? Can you believe that, man? Let's check it out.
From being exposed for lip syncing and being the only artist to ever have a Grammy revoked to having one of the most tweeted about and embarrassing performances ever, these are artists who ruin their careers with just one performance, starting off with Milli Vanilli.
Who?
Milli
Who's that?
Vanilli was a duo whose career was built on a lie. The two men, Rob and Fab, met at a dance seminar in Munich back in 1988. They quickly became friends as they shared common musical goals, so they began searching for work as backup dancers. They also created a demo album that they released under a small German record label that sold just a few thousand copies. This demo, though, was heard by a record producer whose name was Frank Farian, who then decided to invite them out to meet with him. Frank was in the process of creating a star group, and he needed Rob and Fab to do it, but he needed more than just the two guys. The two, excited to sign a record deal and get out of poverty, quickly agreed to the multi-album contract that he gave them, with no understanding of what was inside of that contract. Rob had said, "We lived in a project, we had no money, we wanted to be stars." Little did they know that within that contract was something that stipulated that Rob and Fab would not be the ones singing on their own songs.
At that moment in our lives, we couldn't think better or wiser. We were 22, 23, very naive Germans, French people who never been in the United States, who hardly didn't speak English, who got this offer, you know. And I don't know if I would do it the same way, but probably maybe I would.
When Frank invited them to the studio, he had them sing a song called Girl You Know It's True, and said he wasn't impressed by their singing. So the song they were originally singing was completed by the studio singers Charles Shaw, John Davis, Brad Howell, Jody Rocco, and Linda Rocco. But since Frank had them sign the contract, he had complete control of the two. He came up with the name Milli Vanilli and began his project. Surprisingly enough, this actually wasn't Frank's first rodeo. He had done the exact same thing with a group called Boney M, which had a frontman named Bobby Farrell who was lip-syncing vocals and dancing while other people, including Frank himself, sang in the background. Rob said that at that point, they were pressured into going along with it since they had to pay back their record deal and were under a contract. Pretty quickly, the group began touring, lip-syncing to tracks that were already recorded by the studio singers. The main reason that Frank actually recruited them was for their star image, their looks, their dancing, and their style. But the lip-syncing was an issue for the two right away. Rob said he would ask Frank, "When are we going to be allowed to give some artistic input?" And he would say, yeah, but right now we need you to go out and do promotion. Of course you'll get to do it, just work with us. Their first song, called Girl You Know It's True, the song he had the two sing back when he signed them, was a hit in Germany. Then Frank began working on their debut album, All or Nothing, which was released in late 1988. Rob and Fab released as Girl You Know It's True, with 5 songs hitting the Billboard Hot 100. 3 of these songs actually made it to #1, and by 1990 the album was 6 times platinum, and it even went diamond in Canada. Then at the 32nd Grammy Awards in 1990, they won their first and last Grammy for Best New Artist. Milli Vanilli was on top of the world. They finally had the fame that they wanted, but it wasn't the way they wanted it, and they knew it could not last. For a while, some people had been skeptical of whether or not they were actually the ones singing because when they did interviews, their English wasn't great, which had people second guessing if they could really be the ones singing. Before they won their Grammy in July of 1989, Milli Vanilli were caught in the act at an MTV Arena tour when their vocal track glitched and kept repeating. At that point, the lip-syncing rumors really picked up, and they easily could have just been explained away with them saying they had a background track like many people do, but other people began coming out and saying that they weren't the real singers. Background singer Charles Shaw wasn't credited in the American release of Milli Vanilli's album, so he claimed that he was one of 3 vocalists adding fuel to the Milli Vanilli fire. Charles Shaw and the botched performance. On November 14th of 1990, Frank said he fired the group and admitted that they didn't sing on any of their songs. Shortly after this, Milli Vanilli had a press conference instance where they had their Grammy revoked, which is the first and only time that this has ever happened. However, on the bright side, the man who was actually taking away their Grammy decided to give a speech and talk about how vocally talented Rob and Fab were, acknowledging that they could sing but were instead being held back by their label.
But I do know that these men are able to do what was required of them to make that record, and they were told not to, and that's it. By whom, I don't know, but I do know that they are entirely capable. As a matter of fact, they can make a better recording than the one that was made, as far as I'm concerned.
During the press conference, they explained their side of the story and their experience with Frank. But unfortunately, since they were the face of Milli Vanilli, the public criticized them much more than their labels and managers. They tried to release an album under the name Rob and Fab in 1993, but it completely flopped, performing just as well as their demo album years prior. The two were struggling, thinking that despite the lies, the public would understand them and give them a second chance, but it never happened. On top of that, Rob and Fab were in financial ruin following the Milli Vanilli scandal.
And so forth. Hundreds of millions of dollars are being made. Yeah. You guys are doing these major tours, you guys are on TV, you guys have these singles. How much are you guys profiting yourselves? By the time the first album is now done and the Grammys won and everything.
I can't give you any precise number, but hear me out. He blocked everything because of the fights we had. So the only way we could make our money was on the road and tour in America.
So you weren't making royalties off the album?
No, that dude was holding everything.
Because of their issues with Frank and their poor contract, Rob and Fab hardly made any money from Milli Vanilli. And all of these terrible circumstances did not do well for their mental health. And Rob in particular began to struggle with drugs and started committing crimes. In a final attempt to gain some relevancy, the two swallowed their pride and tried to work with Frank again, but it was too late. They created an album called Back and in Attack, and were going to release it in 1998, but it was canceled after Rob's body was found in a hotel in Frankfurt, Germany. He had passed away at the age of 32 because of an overdose. The story of Milli Vanilli is a tragic one, especially because the man who should have been blamed, Frank Farian, was able to make off with much more money and much less of the criticism. I've covered Rob and Thicke before and how multiple things such as his cringy breakup album aided in ruining his career, but his VMA performance with Miley Cyrus was definitely one of the leading factors. So let's set the stage for this performance.
Pretty cringe.
Long years steadily releasing music and growing his fan base, collaborating with artists like Lil Wayne, Snoop Dogg, Jay-Z, Nicki Minaj, Pharrell, and more. He was fairly successful in the industry, but all of that success would pale in comparison to when he released the song Blurred Lines with Pharrell and T.I. As many of you probably know, this song was a smash hit, eventually becoming certified diamond and the 13th biggest song of the last decade. However, there was also a lot of controversy surrounding the song. The idea of the blurred lines was understood by listeners as blurred lines of consent, and many people attacked Robin for this song, supposedly promoting rape culture. Some people have even called it the most controversial song of the decade. The song was actually mostly written by Pharrell, who said that the song has nothing to do with sex and is actually about being rejected. And then there was also a copyright infringement issue, as the song sounded very similar to Marvin Gaye's song Got to Give It Up, which just added fuel to the fire that was the hatred for Rob and Thicke. People really did not like Rob and Thicke, thinking that he was some sort of promoting scumbag. I think Todd in the Shadows put it best in his video on Rob and Thicke.
He just seemed like a douchebag. There was just a vibe coming off of him. A mildly but tangibly repellent vibe. Just something that made people unhappy when he was happy, and happy when he wasn't.
It's hard to describe how much people really did not like him at the time, but I remember being 11 and hearing tons of adults talk about how awful of a guy he was. Regardless of the hate, Blurred Lines was doing very well, and remained in the upper echelon of the Billboard Hot 100 for 12 weeks, but then it came crashing down. On August 25th of 2013, Rob and Thicke and Miley Cyrus went out on stage during the 2013 MTV Video Music Awards. Miley started touching Robin's nuts with this foam finger, twerking on him and doing all sorts of sexual dancing that left the audience kinda confused. This may not really seem like a big deal to us now, but back then people were freaking out, reporting on it as a train wreck in the classic sense of the word, as the audience reaction seemed to be a mix of confusion, dismay, and horror in a cocktail of embarrassment. Again, looking back, it doesn't seem that crazy, but it was actually one of the most tweeted about events ever, with over 300,000 tweets being posted about it per minute. The two immediately began to face backlash. People already hated Robin, and this just made them hate him more, but Miley actually had her Hannah Montana show pulled from Disney Channel, and Toys R Us discontinued all of the Hannah Montana toys. But in the end, it worked out for her, as she gained over 200,000 Twitter followers from it, and over 90,000 downloads on her latest song Wrecking Ball, which was even more scandalous than the performance. Miley embraced the controversy and used it to fuel her career, but Robin was plummeting. After the VMAs, there were pictures of Robin grabbing some girls behind, which was a big issue since he had been married to Paula Patton. They had been married for 9 years and been together for a total of 21 years. They had a very public relationship, as she was also an actor/model, and she was previously on his album cover and was in his music videos. Following this photo, she filed for divorce, alleging infidelity, physical abuse, and drug abuse. After they got divorced, Robin decided to write an album called Paula, which wasn't even a breakup album, but more so just him begging for her to come back. The album sold 158 copies in Australia. Embarrassing and cringy, and I actually detailed this whole thing in my video called Artists Who Ruin Their Careers with One Album, so feel free to check that out after this one. So obviously the VMA performance wasn't the only factor in Robin's career being ruined, but the performance with Miley on top of the Blurred Lines controversy and his very public divorce all led to the public's strong disdain for Robin Thicke.
Me and all my fans at the show, the gay
The
ones
baby.
The baby is probably one of the biggest ones, being when he shot and killed a man in Walmart back in 2018. The case was dropped as he claimed self-defense, but he also got a little flack for using the news segment where they covered the shooting in one of his music videos. However, after that, DaBaby began killing it in 2019 and 2020. No pun intended. He released songs like Shug, Rockstar, Bop, and many more. He was dominating the radio and had multiple hits on his hands. He was doing features with people like Jack Harlow, Pop Smoke, Chance the Rapper, J. Cole, and many more, solidifying himself as one of the hardest rappers out. But then at a live show, his career took a turn for the worse. On the last day of Rolling Loud Miami in 2021, DaBaby, for some strange reason, decided to start talking about AIDS and gay dudes.
You didn't show up today with HIV, AIDS, any of them deadly
For some random reason.
make you die in 2-3 weeks, put a cell phone light in the lady, if your pussy smell like water, put a cell phone light in the Fellas,
lights up.
Fellas, if you ain't sucking nigga dick in the parking lot, put your cell phone lights in the
Let's be real about this shit.
Yeah, keep it fucking real.
Some of y'all niggas suspect as a motherfucker. Let's be real.
Personally, I just can't imagine what prompted him to say this at a concert. It didn't really fit in at all or make any sense. But regardless, it was a big mistake. Many fans said that this wasn't homophobic, but many others thought it was very offensive, which led to immediate backlash. He quickly responded on an Instagram story.
Me and all my fans at the show, the gay ones and the straight ones, we turned the up. I'm talking about my boy that was at the front of the stage, left over there by where I jumped at. Ask him, he got clips all on his. The whole night was recording. We were front row. Yeah, out there in that jungle, in that water.
But even after doubling down and talking about how people didn't get it because it was a live show, the backlash continued. Many artists like Dua Lipa, Elton John, Demi Lovato, Questlove, and more spoke out against DaBaby's performance. DaBaby then apologized on Twitter, but the controversy didn't stop. His song with Dua Lipa was removed from the radio, clothing brand Boohoo Man ended their collaboration with him, he was dropped by Lollapalooza, dropped by the Governor's Ball, and many more bad things happened to his career. Following all of that, he issued a formal apology on his Instagram on August 2nd, in which he said, "I want to apologize to the LGBTQ+ community for the hurtful and triggering comments I made. Again, I apologize for my misinformed comments about HIV/AIDS, and I know education on this is important. Love to all, God bless." Crybaby's in an interview said he could afford to quit right now if he got canceled, and then he deleted his apology. Because of all this, he lost out on a lot of opportunities, and the Rolling Loud performance was definitely one of the biggest blows to DaBaby's career. But his downfall didn't actually stop there. He had a very public beef with his girlfriend Danny Lay, fought her brother at a bowling alley, got curved when trying to kiss a fan, and then had it happen again a month later, shot an intruder at his house, and punched his own artist Wisdom in the face. All of this led to DaBaby becoming some sort of meme. Not too many people were taking him seriously, and his music was not performing nearly as well as it used to. It all culminated when in August of 2022, he had to cancel a show in New Orleans because apparently he only sold 500 tickets in a 14,000 capacity venue. It was pretty embarrassing and had everyone talking about how he fell off. Of course, he on TikTok called Shake Some, Pop Off, but since the Rolling Loud controversy and everything else that went along with it, DaBaby's career has not been doing too hot. His last real hit was in 2020 with the song Rockstar, and he hasn't had one since. I also want to point out that this was around the time that everyone was saying his flow sounded the same and he was just making the same song over and over again, so that definitely did not help his career. I actually did a full video on this topic last year where I made the assumption that he made a lot of these poor decisions and got into a lot of these controversies because of poor mental health, since he lost both his dad and his brother in the same year right before the controversies. Of course, I wasn't excusing all the stuff that he was doing, but I did want to provide some possible reasoning for why he was doing it, so feel free to check that out after this video.
I'd say the last 10, 12 years, I've
Michelle
enjoyed
Shocked.
such a degree of independence and freedom. I can
Now, Michelle Shocked is a folk singer who was never really super popular, so I'm sure most of us, myself included, aren't really familiar with her, but I absolutely had to include her on this list because her concert performance was so strange and everything following was so crazy, she had to be on here. So Michelle Shocked is a folk singer who began her career at a young age. She first began seeing success in 1988 with her debut album Short Sharp Shocked. The debut single Anchorage even charted on the Billboard Hot 100. She continued releasing music and garnered herself a decent-sized fan base. Again, she was never super popular, but she did have a good enough following to throw shows and do tours throughout the country. In 1989, she joked in an interview that she might be lesbian. Now, this may seem like random information, but it is important to keep in mind because over the course of her career, fans always speculated about her sexuality. She said in an interview in 1990, "I would like a much broader definition for myself. I resent like hell that I was maybe 18 years old before I even heard the L word. I mean, that's understood growing up in a sheltered Mormon environment, but it would have made all the difference for me had I grown up knowing that the reason I didn't fit in was because they hadn't told me there were more categories to fit in too." So basically, it seemed like she was saying she didn't want to fit into any one label when it came to her sexuality. And the reason it's important to know this is because she would go on an anti-gay tirade that would ruin her career. An event that would foreshadow the future was at a Christian event called the Wild Goose Festival, and when an audience member asked about her thoughts on homosexuality, she said, "Who drafted me as a gay icon? You were looking at the world's greatest homophobe. Ask God what he thinks." Of course, this surprised many fans who thought she was a lesbian, and a lot of people kind of felt betrayed. Surprisingly though, she didn't really get much backlash for this, but the rants would soon continue, and apparently said,
"God hates fat." That's a quote that is being attributed to her.
Following that rant, people began complaining and tweeting about it, and she got kicked off of the stage. Then the rest of her tour was canceled. At first, for a while, she straight up denied that she said any of that, but then she said that people misunderstood her and that she said some of God's followers believe that. And finally, she did an interview with Piers Morgan where after beating around the bush for 2 minutes, she finally said that she wasn't homophobic.
Are you homophobic?
Yeah, on the surface, it sounds really bad.
So you're not homophobic?
If you want to keep this simple for the audience, let me just give you a straight no, I'm not homophobic.
The entire interview was very painful to watch, and the way she handled the situation was extremely strange, so it definitely hurt her career. While she was in the midst of this controversy, she also protested for her right of free speech by sitting outside the venue of one of her canceled shows in a very weird outfit.
She's dressed in a white jumpsuit, completely covering her body. She taped her mouth with black tape that reads, "Silenced by Fear." She's playing guitar just feet from the main entrance, underneath the board announcing her show had been canceled. Bands are playing just feet away inside. She's taken a vow of silence and is writing notes on a type of Etch-a-Sketch board to communicate. I talked to Michelle via the Etch-a-Sketch. She wrote, "I think the pressure used to cancel my gigs is very concerning." And she told me there was no due process and any union wouldn't support it, of course referring to her replacement in tonight's show.
So yeah, it seems like this lady was pretty crazy, and I feel bad for the reporter who had to do an interview with her.
So that was it, guys. So that was that. I do think she did do a terrible decision. The last girl, obviously the last person being ruined by one performance and shit. Yeah, man. The Baby's one was a classic, and all that, bro. So yeah, that was the video. See y'all next time. See y'all later. Bye, man.